Welcome everyone to all the listeners who are listening. Once again, this is your host Shailesh from New Zealand World News, bringing you, as always, some of the intelligent and experienced and also passionate candidates who are standing for these elections today, because this election is absolutely at stake. We have seen lots of changes, particularly with related to COVID and after COVID and the economy and the cost of living, you name it, and everything, and the health. So what is prime importance for you at stake at this election is very critical. But what we have seen also as a very democratic turn and direction of our nation has come this year by bringing all the other parties who are bringing to the table lots of new ideas, lots of new passion for our country. And we have got the pleasure today to bring one of the candidates of the Opportunist Party, which is absolutely amazing to hear from those people who are getting involved in the country's development, in the country's and the nation's growth and extension of growth, or moving forward this time when it is so critical crisis and everybody's coming into the rescue of our nation, which is a beautiful thing. So I welcome Ciara, who is the guest speaker today from the Opportunist Party, and I have the luxury to speak to her at the last minute, which is, I really thank you very much for that, Ciara. And let's talk about let's introduce yourself first. Who are you? What sort of background have you got? And why, what's your passion? What's your trigger point to come into political area or to do something for the community? Politics is community for me. It's not politics. It's really community. And that's what your vision seems to be. Tell us something about yourself.
Yes, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Shailesh. So last minute as well, a few days out for the election. So I sort of didn't intend to get into politics, at this age. I'm 29, just turned 29 last week. So I actually started my political journey in the last election. So I was living in Sydney before the whole COVID pandemic kind of hit our end of the world. And so I was only there for a short period, but I think myself and a lot of people my age had sort of felt that New Zealand isn't the place to be able to get ahead as a young person. It's very difficult with, a pretty unproductive economy, unaffordable housing is a really key problem. And, I kind of ended up back in New Zealand, and I was interested in the Opportunities Party in their first election in 2017. Because I did my undergrad in economics, and I sort of I just remember learning a lot about some of the public tax policies, and we have a lot of anomalies in New Zealand. We don't really effectively tax property, and that was a really key thing that that stood out in my mind. And then when I saw that the Opportunities Party, wanted to address that demand issue with at the time it was a property value tax. We're campaigning on a land value tax now, but sort of a similar idea. I was really kind of hidden, like, this is what we need. And there were so many other cool ideas, like a universal basic income. We really wanted to focus on the environment, but we weren't sort of caught up in sort of being a left or right party. It's about, we want to actually have really good solutions that bring us forward and invest in our future. So I kind of stumbled into it last election. I wasn't working, but it was a really interesting experience, especially as a younger person. I was 25 at the time. Jumped into it very naively, but it was a really, I was, standing up, on stage alongside really experienced politicians up in Whangarei, and 3 of them were doctorates in their fields, and I was there saying, I'm not exactly someone that's experienced in a particular career, but I'm here standing as a young person because I want to see that we actually change something and make sure that we have good opportunities in our country as a young person. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about the top party as well, because I think people get quite confused with what we're about, and that's understandable, because when you look at the left or right wing economically, at parties, that's very easy to kind of conceptualize. Whereas we say that we're a centre party. We're a progressive party, though. And what that means is that, we believe that anyone, no matter what ethnicity, size, circumstances, they should be able to have the opportunity to get ahead and thrive. Shouldn't matter. And we're also, being a centre party means we're politically flexible. So, we want to be able to work collaboratively with the parties. And, we will acknowledge when a good idea is a good idea, whether it's left or right. And I think that's what makes us unique. And that's what makes us, a lot of people have found a political home with us because, a lot of people are very moderate, So yeah, that's, I guess, where we are with that. We want to make sure there's a fair tax system, and a really key issue for us, and one of the main reasons I alluded to it earlier, but affordable housing in New Zealand is a really core problem. When you think about New Zealand specifically, that is something that we seriously need to address.
Yeah, we'll come to that housing and tax and all that. But that's a good point that you raised. To all the listeners, you can see that you are a political party where you want to work with everyone and anyone, collaborate. And the good idea is a good idea, bad idea is a bad idea, which is what the democratic process teaches us. And this is what is the right direction for this time of the country, when we all are, trying to collaborate and trying to manage the economy and everything and everyone. Inclusive of everyone is the key for our success to the direction of the country, which you are taking the direction of the country, which is really good and cool. So no, that's appreciate that view of your political party is to take everyone and inclusive of everyone and work with everyone and always say good to good and bad to bad, but always raise your voice. That's the main thing, key thing.
Yeah.
So with that in view, I wanted to come and dwell into a little bit deeper into the visions for you as a young person. Is absolutely, for all the people who are listening, I mean, it's never too young or never too old to enter into a politics or enter into a community service, which is what Ciara has done today. And this is a good example of you coming in spite of all the odds of listening and looking at things that were not working or that is affordable, non-affordable, yet you chose to come and try to help. That's the key thing. So with that in mind, what do you think as a young person that today, when you are young, that your dreams, your wants, your needs are different. And then when you grow a little bit, your wants and needs keep changing. And this is a changing environment that we are into today, the cost of living, basically. Tell me something about the cost of living that, when you talked about affordability, not just housing, but everything. What's your view currently? What's your visions for our nation that you would like to see coming down and to for everyone a fair and justifiable, cost to manage? Tell us something.
Yeah. Well, I honestly think everything comes back to housing to some extent. When you think about someone's personal and net worth and what they're able to spend on, we're spending a high proportion of our income towards either renting or towards your mortgage rate. And that's just not really acceptable. And I think I want to sort of bring it to the idea that because we're putting so much money into housing in particular, which is should be a very basic right as a person, there's a lot of lost opportunity for people to really be investing in innovation and business. And the way the tax settings are at the moment is encouraging people to pour their net worth into housing, not because necessarily they want to even, but because that you either have to, or that's a really good idea to invest your money into property. Yeah. And I think that actually has a wider impact towards, our productivity in the country, like if people aren't sort of able to even take risks on like maybe, coming up with solutions and business or even investing into other people who are doing that, then we're kind of not really seeing this like, more jobs happening and more, of these solutions being kind of addressed.
So I want to ask you, with that view in the mind, for the young people or the younger generation who have not been able to buy their first home, what's your vision in terms of like what they should be really, is housing is a investment, or is housing is to live? What's your view on it? Like, people are just saying that, I want to get into the home or buy a home, but as an investment, not as a home to live. What's your view and what's your take on that for the younger generation who are listening, basically, as well?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? As with most things, there's usually no black and white answer. We want to sort of discourage the the speculation on housing as a primary investment, because at the end of the day, housing doesn't create jobs. It's just there to kind of house someone. But at the same time, we do need like landlords to be able to provide housing. We can't just simply decide everyone should get rid of their homes. That's not going to work. But I think what we see is that the private market is probably taking too much of the housing supply, and that we want to be able to invest in a big community housing fund. So that could be social housing, but it's also to be able to provide another option for low cost housing and increase the supply in that area, not just the private market. It will have a place, but I think it's just there's too much of a focus on that being the primary solution.
You need to redistribute, you need to redirect a few things in that space, is what I can understand.
Yeah, so like our primary way that we want to do that is through a land value tax. There's kind of many ways why this is good, because for one, it's actually very easy to adopt. When you just in comparison to say the wealth tax, which we wouldn't support that from the Greens, you kind of have to evaluate like what that person's capital is. Like there's a lot of administration and you don't necessarily know what the value of a piece of artwork is right away, Whereas the way that we capture land value is there's already a system in place with LIN. So it really is just a click of a button would be able to understand what the land value is. Simple. So there's an efficiency that is a primary kind of positive thing that we have with land value tax. The other thing is like
it also guarantees that land tax or land value tax guarantees that there is a income, and it's not a speculation, or it's not an imaginary number that we have to wait for some houses to sell and then we receive the money. It's actually as you tax, you get the money straight away, right?
Yes, it's in real time. It's an annual payment. Is like how we see it. We see it as 0.5% of the land value is what we're proposing as a tax. So it's actually not like a crazy amount, it will be fairly doable. But what it also does is because the land value is just the land, it's not the property that's sitting on it. What it encourages is more density. And this is actually, I think cross-party, we see that there is a support for urban density, with the residential urban planning laws that have come out. And so it's going to happen. We are going to see more housing. But what this does is it encourages more, dwellings to sit on that same property. So for those developers, that's going to be good for them to be able to say, okay, what can we fit on this plot of land? What was the other point? I've just lost my train of thought, sorry. But
I know. You said that you don't like wealth tax, or you are not supporting the wealth tax, but isn't it the land also includes into the wealth? I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I believe it is, yes. But but we're saying that we don't want to have a wealth tax also because we don't think that being wealthy is necessarily a bad thing. And we wealth tax is going to be a signal to those who are planning to invest in New Zealand to just say, no, we don't want that. Like we have to be a little bit pragmatic about certain things. And being wealthy isn't an inherently bad thing. We need to still.
But if I ask you that if are across the ditch, whether it is Australia, America, or whether it is UK and all our partners, trading partners, they do have this kind of capital gain tax, wealth tax, stamp duties, and all sorts related to their wealth, the property. So why can't we have New Zealand? Why we see that?
Well, we see that coming in the place of the land value tax, and we think that's the most appropriate approach to that. The actual tax plan that we're proposing is very similar to the Australians model as well, and so that's something to recognise that we're actually quite an anomaly in New Zealand to not have a tax-free threshold, and so we're proposing a $15,000 tax-free threshold. So that's something.
Sorry. Just on that, sorry to cut you. Just on that, 10,000, you are the party where Greens have also saying 10,000 threshold. First 10,000 we won't tax, and you are the one who are saying first 15,000 you won't tax. Whereas the major parties, Labour and National, they don't want to do anything of that sort, in spite of the fact that Australia, our neighboring country, does have got that system in place of 18,000 something with no tax. So, how would you going to pay for that 15,000 threshold? From where? Is it the land tax that you're going to bring and pay for?
Yes. So the tax, so it's actually a tax switch is what we're saying. So we're proposing a tax neutral policy. So the land value tax is going to be paying for income tax decreasing. So that would include that tax-free threshold. But for a lot of people, they'll see that their income tax will be lower because we want to, encourage people to make more from their income, but not necessarily from land speculation.
Yeah. So do you think the valuation of the land, I want to ask you a direct question. Have you worked out that the valuation of the land currently as it sits with the councils who are doing this valuation, and based on that, you will be taxing 0.5%. But the current valuation, do you think is appropriate, accurate, or is it a buffer, or is it like a ballooned up, or is it really needs to be reformed? What's your take on that? The current valuation.
I wouldn't know the exact answer to that. I think that they have a system in place. That's what I understand. Linz has that data. How they take that value, I wouldn't know exactly if that's appropriate or not. But thinking from the sort of big picture perspective, we want to discourage that, and we know that that's doable to at least capture as a value very easily. And I think what we will see as well, longer term with the land value tax, you'll see that the land value will decrease in price. And so longer term, we'll see that property prices will decrease over time because of that. And that's what the sort of studies from overseas have shown. And that also, I would like to point out that because I think a lot of people get worried that if you're a renter, that cost would be passed on to you. But because we see that the actual value of the land and therefore the value of the property decreases, that can't be passed on because the actual value of the property has decreased. So so that's not going to be showed as something that's going to be passed on to the tenant.
So do you think that with this also the inequality will reduce to some extent, just like what Greens are proposing, that by putting wealth tax, they want the inequity to be minimized, or reduction of inequality has to be there. So that's why I'm putting this. Do you also think the similar kind of that with this land tax that could also reduce a little bit of inequality that we are facing?
I mean, this is a primary focus, is to reduce the inequality, but I think this is also a more pragmatic approach to discourage the property speculation in particular. And also we know that will be able to pay for the income sort of tax being decreased with the tax-free threshold. But a big part of our inequality is driven by our housing prices. So if we can, that's like the main focus of what that's addressing.
Right, right. And in terms of health, you also have a similar policy like the dental care free for under 30s, which is quite aligned with. Tell me something about that. That also will be paid from this land tax that you are going to do. Is it also
Yes, some of it will be from the land tax, but I think this one might have to be government spending as well. So we're not scared to actually use the government to actually spend it because we believe it's an investment. I'll talk to that a bit later. But in terms of the teal card, this is for people who are under 30. Only got 1 year to go, but but it will be free public transport and free healthcare. The healthcare is including the dental health, as you mentioned, but also mental health and eye care, including glasses even. Right. So we want it because these things are really costly. Like I feel very grateful because I have eye problems, so I wear contact lenses. I had that problem since I was a kid. I also had the dorky glasses. But I was lucky that my parents were able to take me to an optometrist and be able to afford that because that's not a cheap thing to do, right? And it's not, young families tend to not necessarily have all the disposable income because kids are expensive, right? So
absolutely, yeah. No, you said very well, rightly, that our major income goes to the servicing the house issues, whether it is rent or whether it is mortgage that we pay, and this is where the cost of living has become. But related to housing, I wanted to ask about the banking, like the interest rates and the economy that is actually inflated at the moment. And they're not saying it's coming down, but you have something for that economy. Under the economy, you said something about the Reserve Bank, that they have been focusing on the employment, in which you want to probably remove that aspect, maximizing employment. Or do you have any policy around banking that the interest rates needs to be controlled or curtailed or to be monitored or to be managed by the Reserve Bank of New Zealand for the directions or anything on that sort? Or
nothing specifically. I think we're not scared to spend money if we see it as a future investment. We do actually have very relatively low debt GDP, spending, ratio to debt GDP. Ratio compared to other parts of the world. I think we're under 30% spending of our GDP, whereas the US and the UK are around 95 to 100%. And it makes me think, because they obviously have a lot of problems there. So think about the room we have that we can spend and actually really get ahead. And I'm definitely not for willy-nilly spending, but I think we can certainly invest in the right way. The Keynesian kind of economic kind of ideas, like we can sort of do it if it means that we're the flow and effect of the economy works out. That's just something to think about there. In terms of inflation, the spending the government money can certainly be obviously an impact to inflation, which is the problem with it. But one of the ideas that Raf, our party leader, has spoken about is it's not like a policy of ours at the moment, but I think it's a really interesting idea, is government supporting, probably giving more money to employers or to people earning income, but to make them save and put it into their KiwiSaver. And this actually shows to decrease inflation, apparently, if we force people to save, but it still means that they're able to benefit and have money that's kind of accumulating over time.
Yeah, you're right. And that's what I wanted to come back to. That next question is related to that, when you wanted to pay money or give money to the businesses or to the individuals to grow. And this is where, when it comes to spending, yes, spending could increase inflation, but spending in the right direction is not an inflation, according to me, because you just have to manage then, basically, because we did spend during COVID, which was required. If we had not spent, probably we would be struggling even more. That's what I would say, because
for sure.
we have created the lowest unemployment rate when we look at the fiscal policy and the one that was released. And national probably are also quite agreeing with certain things with labor. But main thing is I wanted to know from your point of view perspective, this is the time when people need extra money to spend. This is the time money people to grow, even to start up a business, they need money because they don't have. So do you have something on the business front for business people, small businesses, startup businesses, anything around that?
Yeah, nothing specific, but I guess our sort of tax-free threshold addresses that in our sort of phase one tax plan. Longer term, we want to see a universal basic income. And so that's, it's actually quite a politically neutral idea, because I've seen people in ACT and stuff love like the idea. I think Don Brash back in the day proposed a version of a universal basic income. And I think it's hard to get people to wrap their head around, but it has the benefit that everyone just gets the money. They have a little bit more money to spend, including lower income people who are more likely to spend on their, businesses and communities around them. And then it gives, it gives them, for people who are, younger and, might be creatives or, budding entrepreneurs, at least it gives them a little bit to get by, and at least, enough to be able to afford the basics while they're sort of working on these ideas, because, these things don't just give you money right away, of course. So, we want to have people be able to take risks, because we need younger people to be able to actually, solve a lot of our future problems, or might not necessarily future problems. But when you think about, climate change is a really big thing that we need to address, and it's not just the emissions, it's like the fresh water problem that we're starting to face in New Zealand, and, eroding waterways. And, that's going to have to come from the agriculture sector. There's going to have to be a lot of innovation there, which we're already doing. But what I'm saying is, if people have the, at least the basics to get by, we're going to have more likely see people be able to focus on this as, something they're able to achieve.
So tell me something, Ciara, what is because there are so many things you guys have come up with, and like every other political, and like to run a nation, you need all of these things. But for you, in terms of as a young person, as a thriving in the country, that you would like to see in these difficult times, how to get out of it, and what are your first 2 or 3 priorities that you would be focusing on? What in your visions? What is your visions for this?
Yeah, I think, it sounds more, but I think like affordable housing is the primary reason I've, joined politics. And that's just something that I think has an impact on so many things. Even like when you think about like unhealthy, like homes that are cold and not insulated, that has a flow-on effect to the health system. Absolutely. And we're seeing like the health system is treated as it's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff with people going to ED, and it's like, well, it'd be a lot cheaper if we actually just invested in proper homes and instead of the expensive hospitals.
No, I totally agree. And I totally agree with that. Housing, health, they are the hand in hand kind of things where we spend a lot of money and we invest a lot of money. But what is your view on the education sector that you think also for the younger generation, and also what we saw after COVID, lots of kids didn't attend, or their mental health was went into a different direction. How do you see that area of education as one of the priorities for particularly youngsters, and particularly the generations to come,
Yeah, I mean, COVID really put a blip on, a whole generation of people in school, right? So that's clearly unavoidable. And I think it'll be interesting to see long term the impacts we'll see on that kind of group of people. But for us, look, I'm not an expert in like the specific things we should be teaching people, but I think a big thing that we really want to see is civics education in schools.
Yeah.
I'm sure you speak to a lot of people, and
But what would you like
myself, I would like to see actual kind of life skills, and I'm sure a lot of people want to see this, right? How many people come out of school, and myself included, not knowing how tax works, not knowing, like, some people don't know how to drive a car. I learned how to drive a car, but there's so many aspects to life, even just like the political system, like knowing how civics and works. I had no interest in it, but I think that, you see other countries, they actually do teach the stuff like how to vote, in schools, and it has a really good impact on, I think that's something we want to focus on. So that's actually part of our teal card policy as well. So you have to do some sort of civic service at school in order to get a $5,000 sort of universal bonus that can be used towards your KiwiSaver or education. That is paired with some sort of form of giving back to your community, so that we could see this working with the student volunteer army as an example. I know we've spoken with Outward Bound. So it's pretty loose at the moment, but that's the idea, is that we want young people to feel like they're contributing to their community and kind of, I don't know, just long-term create better humans, not just the basic, just academic stuff, because that's not the only part of, how you get by in life.
So do you think financial literacy, which Labour is planning to bring, and other Greens as well, supporting the financial literacy in the schools for the kids, is a good idea? And was long
look, that is something I'm not, like, I don't have a very educated understanding of, but I believe that so we have a education spokesperson who's, did her studies as a PhD level on that. I believe she's a supporter of that. I think that, just from basic level, like, there are a lot of people who don't know how to, like, string a sentence together and write, like, when you're in the workforce, I find so many really bad emails from people, just they're not written properly. And that's pretty basic stuff. And so I think from a very limited perspective, I think that's like something we should certainly focus on. But I think even at the same time, like, when you think about other countries in the world, and like how a lot of places are bilingual even, and we don't have that as part of our curriculum, I think that could help our general languages, because it's shown that once you speak a language, once you'll be able to learn a second language, it's easier to learn others, and I think your understanding of linguistics would be higher. So that's just something to probably consider, is maybe we do need to have, even if it's like Te Reo Māori in schools, and I know that might be controversial for some people, but I just think that even having that, even though it might not be useful in the world, would be really good for people's understanding of languages and
so
feeling connected to New Zealand.
So coming to this, situation of today's election time, we have seen lots of, difference of opinion, but difference of divisive kind of thing. And even like some comments which were not really negative comments, rather than positive comments coming from all political parties' perspective. But new political parties like you are ready to reunite with everyone, and also your goal are actually to work with everyone and not negativity and on only positivity. So how do you see this election from your perspective, like, with so much divisive minds, and then whoever comes in the government, you think you're quite confident enough to work with anyone, basically?
I definitely think that we have enough, like, sort of overlap with all the parties to some extent. And so I think we can certainly do that. It is looking like it will be a national-led government, and there's a lot of talk of, New Zealand First being in the mix. We're saying that we're a better option. So, I mean, obviously that it's going to be very up to the election results, how that all plays out. I don't think anyone knows how this is going to turn out. But yeah.
But so I wanted to ask this question, inclined that, everybody's looking for change this time, and that's probably why we are already seeing a change of surging. The local different parties have come up. That's already a change in itself, because last year there wasn't that enough. I remember last time in 2017, one of your leaders was also Jeff Sims. I think Jeff Sims.
Yeah, Jeff Simmons. Yes.
Yeah, Jeff Simmons. I also interviewed him at that time as well, and my reason was because I loved their tax policies at that time as well. It was quite amazing to come up with some new ideas to make everyone affordable, everyone, beneficial in the tax.
Yes.
And that was your key message. So when I want to ask you change, so everybody wants to look for change. Everybody is looking for change. We already are seeing changes in political parties coming up, which they were small or they were nowhere, but they have come up, and that's a good thing. Even ACT was nowhere, but all of a sudden they have surged. And to a large extent, they have surged. They had only one seat at one time, but now they are like a partner reckon, So this change, what do you think changes? What's your version of change? Is it political change? Is it political party change? Is it policy change? Or is it a change for individual and change for everyone? How do you see change definition? If you have to define change means for you, what is change?
Big question. I think what we've been seeing in the previous kind of elections is, how things play out is like we have this flip-flop between the major parties.
Yeah.
A lot of their ideas aren't even that dissimilar, really. But I think what happens is because just the political game is so strong, it's about kind of you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about, okay, what do we actually want to achieve? What are the actual solutions? And, you have budgets kind of proposed for certain areas. But it's like, okay, what's the actual, how do we get there? I don't really see that like in either direction. And I think, we have like quite a talented group of people on top that are very skilled in their particular fields. And I think, what that will bring is maybe hopefully more action if we were to see, to be able to group with either side. But I think also because we just need to chill out a little bit and just be able to actually sort of take a sort of more academic approach to a lot of these problems, like we shouldn't just, we want to take the ideology out of it. And I think that's going to be important. And hopefully that will bring about a better culture in the political space. So yeah, I think just that political flexibility and solutions and future focus.
I think solution-based should be the focus of all political parties rather than the problem-based or blaming-based. We can be more focused on blames or good or bad or thing. I am good or you are good or you are bad or you are better.
Yeah, putting a very moral judgment on a lot of things, whereas I mean, it's hard to completely take that away, but, I see it from both sides, and it really rubs me the wrong way on either side, like, I think everyone, like, I think politicians, most of the time for every party genuinely want to see positive impacts.
Yep.
But unfortunately, just with how the political kind of culture is at the moment is not, it's not sort of geared to be in a way that is solutions focused, unfortunately. It's about trying to get as many votes and, get into parliament,
Absolutely. So tell me something about your local area where you are standing and why you chose that area, basically, or do you Do you know that area very well and you live there, or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, well, I live in Mount Albert as a suburb, and so Mount Albert electorate kind of covers,
Mm,
it's central West Auckland, so it covers Grey Lynn, Westmere,
mm,
and sort of all the way to Owairaka.
yes.
So there's kind of different demographics
Mm,
in this electorate. So I've been living in the area for the past 3 years,
mm,
both in Westmere and Mount Albert. So yeah, I guess that's why I chose the electorate, because I live here.
mm,
But I didn't really think about the community probably quite as much until I started
mhm.
campaigning and sort of
Sure,
really
sure.
thinking about, talking to business owners down the road and,
Mm,
just actually going out and talking to people, I guess. But it is a really beautifully diverse community. It's close to the city, but it still feels like you're in a nice sort of,
mm,
there's still parks and it's still nice and away from the city. I think it's kind of I love it, honestly. Like I want to be able to stay here. If I
yeah.
was, in terms of Auckland, this is like where I want to be
All
living.
right. Yeah.
It really will depend on how much, because I'm renting at the moment, and I
Yeah.
know this house I'm living in is going to be demolished at some point for
Yeah.
townhouses. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so we'll see how we go. But I think there needs to be, I think, more business improvement here. I sort of see a lot of the shops down here,
Sure. Mm,
they're actually rifled with crime. Like that
mhm.
it's a really, you can see why people are kind of putting crime as their number one issue. But I think that crime is a sort of
Yeah.
it's something that's happened because we haven't addressed our social issues properly.
Yeah.
It's a flow on effect, right? But I think, yeah, it is really sad, some of the stories, like, shoplifting of the charity shops that,
Mhm.
like non for profit
Yeah.
organizations.
I know you come from an area where I guess Jacinda was there from that perspective. And
Yes,
as a youth, and what's your message to the youth who are listening and who want to really get into this mode of politics or having community service or to make community work? What's your message to those people who are listening, who are youth and not even though they are not youth, but they are youth? As a youth, what do you want to send a message, with regard to the current situation that we are in? Do we need more and more involvement of people and engagement in that regard? Give
for
something and some.
sure. I think a lot of young people are pretty over it. Like, I mean, for one, getting into politics, like,
Mm.
admittedly, can be a little bit boring. When you're thinking about your own life, your own social life,
Yeah.
like, it isn't on top of the list for a lot of people, but it is
Sure.
really important. These things have, an impact on your life, these decisions that get made. And so, and I think also younger generations have been less tied to their community. And I think that actually comes back to housing, because, you know, when you're young, you end up living in flats and you don't have stability a lot of the time.
Mm.
If someone decides to sell up, that means you're out of your house.
Mm.
And then you have to find another flat. And, it's like pretty rational to not feel like pouring into your community if you don't know where you're going to be living for a long
Correct.
term.
Correct.
And
Correct.
that's when you find, like, later in your life, when you're a little bit more settled and hopefully, when you're starting a family and hopefully have a house. That's not always the case, right? But
Mm.
that's
Mm.
when I think people start to think about their community a bit more. But
Yeah.
I think if we had more stability with housing,
Yeah.
we would
Yeah.
we would see a lot more community focus,
Mm.
because people would know that they were there long term. I think that is actually genuinely a problem.
Mhm.
Um, Also, most people my age group are honestly not in New Zealand. I don't know how many people I see on my social media. Most,
Yeah.
I would honestly, I don't know how many people are actually in New Zealand anymore. Most of them are like over either
Sure.
in the UK or Australia. I think that's
Right.
also part of it too.
Of course, of course. No, that's a good talking to you, Ciara. It's really wonderful to get all your insights and visions. But as I can see, and all listeners, you can see, number one problem or number one issue is housing, and housing is connected with lots of things, with your cost of living, or with your issues with regard to your health, or with issues with regard to your stability and employment and all sorts. It comes down to the number one issue is housing for Ciara, which is beautiful insight, Ciara. And I think this is amazing interview that you gave me and conversation that we had. We would definitely like to dwell more on the insights, on the real benefits of the taxation that people earn. But you touched on it, which is quite nice, because you are the only party who is giving 15,000 threshold, which is quite equivalent to Australia, which is really
Yes.
good at a time when we need all this tax. And because I understand how important it is to get that direct tax benefit rather than having an imaginary income and then giving the tax. So thank you so much for doing this. Final message to all the voters who hasn't voted, please make sure that this is your opportunity you got the opportunity to listen to Ciara, and she's going to tell you how and what, but no matter whether you like her policies, other party, doesn't matter. My message is, please go and vote, because your vote counts, and that's your right. That's your fundamental rights to do it. That's my message. And don't just sit there and not vote, because that's not going to help the country and the nation. So final message, Ciara, please give your final message to all the audiences who are listening.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just tag on to what you said. Like, you no matter what, just go out and vote. No, it doesn't matter if you vote for Tom or not. I mean, I'd love you to, obviously. But we actually have a system that where your vote actually counts for something. Vote for the person or the party that you think your values align with. Don't just try and strategically vote. It doesn't, like, that grand scheme, it doesn't really work. You just vote for who you care about. The minor parties are genuinely a really, a good opportunity to vote for in this upcoming election. It's going to be really interesting seeing how it all plays out, but just give this a go. Give the minor parties a go as well.
Yeah.
That's something I will definitely say.
Yes, thank you so much. So listeners, you can listen, and you have heard from Ciara, which is not just she's talking about to go and vote, but also look into the detail of the candidates' policies, party policies, and policies do define the country's future and the country's direction. And you have got some cool policies with regard to tax, with regard to health, with regard to housing. These are the three basic fundamental issues, but they also have got cool policies. But we touched on few policies today, which really matters. And before you go to vote, think about it. What matters to you? What policies really affect you? And please go and vote. So thank you so much, Ciara. Once again,
thank you, Shailesh.
We really appreciate your time with us. And hopefully we'll bring back to you in our studio, NZ World News, once again. So your message to my NZ World News, okay?
Thank you so much.